Hello, check. Kurumjari mayam punamakpu. A warm greetings to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I, Laishram Nilapriya, PhD scholar of Department of Life Sciences, Geology, will be the host of today's function. And it's my honor to welcome you all to this significant talk on People's Union for Civil Liberties Tribunal report on Manipur crisis. Today, we have assembled not merely for a program, but for a collective reflection on truth, justice, and hope for peace in Manipur. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to welcome our dignitaries on the stage. To begin with, I would like to call upon our esteemed dignitaries and chairpersons of today's program, Ningthoukhongam Ibungochoubi, Singh, the executive editor, the Manipur Mail, on the stage. Sir, please. Also, I would like to call upon our speaker, Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akoijam, Honorable Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, Inner Manipur, to grace us with his presence on the stage. As our distinct guests and invitees arrive, may I request everyone to kindly settle down and join us in the spirit of solidarity and respect that these demand. Proceeding next, to honor our esteemed dignitaries, we shall begin with our small felicitations. May I request the volunteers of Manipur University to kindly do the honors of extending our traditional token of welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, we are felicitating our chairperson, Ningthoukhongam Ibungochoubi Singh, the executive editor, the Manipur Mail. Ladies and gentlemen, we are felicitating our speaker, Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akoijam. Thank you to the volunteers of Manipur University. Now, to set the tones for today's program, may I invite our Sri Nongthamong Suraj Singh, ex-president of Manipur University 2024-2025 and caretaker of Manipur University Students' Union to give a welcome address. Mr. Nongthamong, please.
Anwa Magdata Ambo Kaikunawachari, Amadingasiki, Taramasibu, Wong Panaba, Kai Chergi, Pom Lagalation Bireba, Mingona Kacharavata, Kai Oza, Ningthoukhongam, Ibungochoubi, executive editor, the Manipur Mail, Amadi Koyingasiki, Taramasiki, man speaker, Oiriba, Mingona Kacharavata, Oza, Dr. Angomcha Bimol, Honorable Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, Inner Manipur, Anwa Magdada, Kaikuna Butchari, Amading a Sigi Lakpiriba Toanba, Department Sing Digi, Ozasing, Scholars Sing, Students Sing, Digi Midiagi Chinau Sing, Atopa, Ahoy, Langbira Kliba, Nasiki Togosibu, Tabigani, Haina Toyak Chang Yorakanda, Langbira Kliba, Miambu, Mushugi, Okokinjarakanda, Kaikuna Butchari, Amadi, Makatarakpa, Ozasingi, Hogi, Auditorium loiba phoba ngasiki program si fazana yaubira kanda akogi ngasiki PUCL ki Tribunal report asigi on Manipur crisis hariba akoi ngasiki osasingna kangbi gedriba si akoi fazana marik chuma phom singa si akoi punna tamina kanda akoi pung sing oiba wakhalon mayama sidagi akoi crafts to bangam na hokna ba akoi mayam punna sarya minasi hai phom phone thamjar kanda ngasiki timbirek liba mayam bo amuk kahana ikai khumna ba chari. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ningthoukhongam, Suraj Singh. Now, it's my privilege to invite Wangam Akra's outgoing research scholar representative, MUSU 2024-2025, and the research scholar Department of Histories to give a keynote address.
Good afternoon. Respected chair of today's talk, Sri Ningthoukhongam Ibungochoubi, Executive Editor, the Manipur Mail. Respected speaker of today's talk, Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akoijam, Honorable Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, in Manipur. Respected teachers, scholars, and students present here inside this auspicious auditorium with eager ears, I am Bimol Akoijam, the outgoing research scholar representative of Manipur University Students' Union 2024-25. Based in New Delhi, the People's Union for Civil Liberties, PUCL, is one of India's largest human rights organizations. It was formed in 1976 by socialist leader Jayaprakash Narayan, along with Sri Krishnakant and Sri B.M. Tarkunde and many other individuals, as the People's Union for Civil Liberties and Democratic Rights, PUCL-DR. Jayaprakash Narayan originally intended PUCL to be an organization free from political ideologies, bringing those concerned about defending civil liberties and human rights from different backgrounds onto a common platform. The PUCL work with advocates, activists, and people from various backgrounds across India to defend human rights enshrined in the Indian Constitution. The primary functions are increase consciousness about and commitment to human rights and civil liberties among all sections of people, provide a platform for all groups as well as individuals to come together and further the cause of human rights, energize and creatively use existing institutions like the court and the press so that they may become more sensitive to human rights situation in India and intervene directly in cases where gross violation of human rights takes place. This is an overview of the report. On August 20, 2025, PUCL released the Independent People's Tribunal on the ongoing ethnic conflict in Manipur at the Press Club of India, New Delhi. The extensive 694-page report was prepared by a tribunal chaired by former Supreme Court Justice Kurian Joseph, and it included a jury of judges, human rights activities, academics, and social scientists from across India. It draws from a collective input, including testimonies from over 150 survivors of the ethnic conflict, group discussions, and written submission reflecting a diverse experience from across Manipur. Today, I want to highlight a key aspect of this report, not to spread despair, but to ignite a collective demand for truth, justice, and healing, not from the conflict, but from the report and the PUCL at large. First, let me be clear. The tribunal concludes plainly that the violence, which began on May 3, 2023, was not spontaneous. It was planned, ethnically targeted, and enabled by systematic failure of the state. What unfolded was not a sudden outburst. It was a result of a simmering tension, polarizing narratives, and a dangerous failure of leadership. In addition, the tribunal identifies that the March 2023 High Court of Manipur order recommending the scheduled tribe status for the Meitei community acted as a major trigger, heightening fear among the scheduled tribe status and igniting widespread unrest on the long-standing ethnic tension, dispute over land, marginalization of the so-called Koki-Jo communities, serving as the structural roots and the catalyst of the violence that erupted. The report claimed to shatter the official narratives of the violence as a simple ethnic clash between the Meitei and the Koki-Jo communities. Second, the report highlights the brutality and the inhumanity that mark this violence: killing, mutilations, mass sexual violence, denial of medical aid, and looting of firearms. The report details how state armories were looted in a systematic manner And these sophisticated weapons like Insass rifle, AK-47s, grenades found their way almost exclusively in the hands of the Meitei mobs and militia, specifically the Arambai Tengol and the Meitei Lipun. More than 60,000 of our fellow citizens remain displaced, living in relief camps that lack dignity, security, and hope. Third, it revealed a breakdown of the rule of law. The report sharply criticized the selective FIR filing, politicized investigation, lack of neutral SITs, weak judicial oversights. The report accuses security forces in the Delhi area for active involvement in the violence. The report reads, there are numerous documents, instances where police and state forces stood by as mob burned Kukijombi village in the valley. In some cases, they even participated. This is not a failure of law and order. This is active collusion. This was not a riot. It was, as the report states, one-sided majoritarian violence enabled by the state of Manipur. Even intervention by the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court, were poorly implemented, leaving survivors without redress. The report lamented that even directories from the Supreme Court, such as the Gita Mittal Committee and the CBI investigations, were deemed under-resourced, poorly executed, and inadequately followed up. The report also talks about an architecture of impunity as an answer to how does such a violence continue for so long. The PUCL report points to a well-established architecture of impunity, systematic disarmament. While Kukijo villages were disarmed, Meitei mobs and militias like the Arambai Tengol and the Meitei Lipun were allowed to operate with little impunity. Polarized administration, the civil and the police administration became deeply polarized on ethnic lines, refusing to act or acting in a blatantly partisan manner. The rule of law was replaced by the rule of the mob. A vacuum of governance, the report highlights the complete breakdown of constitutional machinery. The state government vanished. The central government was a distant, silent observer. I think the central government part is somewhat through here. The impunity is what allows the violence to simmer, erupt, long after the world has stopped watching. Recommendation by the report. The report charts a way forward. The tribunal calls for justice through independent investigation, a Supreme Court monitored special investigation team to probe all cases, including those state forces. Structural reforms such as a permanent High Court bench in the Hill District to ensure access to justice for the marginalized group. Who are the marginalized group? I do not know how the tribal are marginalized when the report asserts that the socio-economic level of the Meitei and the Kukijo are on a comparable level, save for a few infrastructural development in the valley areas. Accountability for hate speech to curb the propaganda that fueled ethnic division. Humanitarian rehabilitation, ensuring that displaced families receive not just food and shelter, but healthcare, mental health support, and path to rebuild their lives. Most importantly, the tribunal urges a restorative justice framework, one that goes beyond punishment to foster acknowledgement, reparation, and reconciliation, for without healing, justice will remain incomplete. Huziki report to the mentioned Amoina Pikat Pirakpa Moiki Huziki report to the Yawu Singtuni Adubo. Ngasi Manipur University Students Union 2024-25 ka Research Club Manipur University gana pullaga sinjariba atogon PUCL Tribunal report on the Manipur crisis haibasida report to gi manungda macha khaina lanba fake oina consider to way adaba point mayam ama yawbadu ngasi akhoi gi oja speaker akhoi mayam gi oja Bimol na akhoi gi mit mamang da thambiraga report adu kadaida kayamuk yamna lanbage kayamuk yamna chumbage habada akhoi punna khanane na bagi tanja adu lominasi mayam loibabo saruk yaminasi haijaraga loisinjari. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akas, for your inspiring keynote. With this, we shall now hear the opening remark by the chair of today's session, who will frame the discussion and offer us with valuable perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Ningthoukhongam Ibungochoubi, the chairperson, the executive editor, the Manipur Meld. With this, I hand over the mic.
A very good afternoon. Honorable Member of the Parliament, Professor Angomcha Bimol Akoijam, all the students who are gathered here for this very special meeting, special guests. It is very important for us to acknowledge any report, whether it comes through the social media or formally it is presented by a particular organization. For us who grew up as a student in the late 70s and early 80s, PUCL was synonymous, or still is synonymous, as the protector of human rights. As we were in our school days, we were in our college days, even when we were in the university, PUCL, I believe we were very proud even to be associated with this very organization called PUCL. What makes it important today? In the very context of what has happened in Manipur 2 years ago, and still, if there is a lull, whether that could be construed as peace, or whether this is some kind of a compulsion that we are compelled to live with. As a journalist, we have been a part of a process of reporting what has been happening in different parts of our country. Whether it is Manipur, Nagaland, Assam, particularly Nagaland, Manipur and Assam, of course some part of Tripura then, when armed conflicts began in its full swing. We read, we reported, and in fact we were a part of that life cycle in the late 70s and mid 80s. Professor Bimol, I think, was also, as I can recollect, was a very active young student then, even when I was in the University of Delhi. Why we have gathered here today, particularly at this very crucial juncture, I believe, it is because of a report that has come out from PUCL. The very urgency of the students' community in Manipur, that is the Manipur University Students' Union, having to realize that such a report has to be read, dissected, para by para, from a particular prismatic view, whether this report has to be either countered or has to be critically examined, or is there a bias? Everybody is a heart, everybody has a mind. We have to intellectually understand, both emotionally, spiritually, and most importantly, academically, based on facts and figures of what exactly happened in Manipur. We are very fortunate today that we have young students from the Manipur University coming here to listen to Professor Bimol, an eminent scholar. We have all heard him, we have seen him the last couple of years, that since the state of Manipur was engulfed in a conflict. The present generation, I suppose, is a part of that conflict, and how people from outside view, review, critically examine, or trying to give a statement from how they understand this very problem is something that makes us worried. if at all, the report submitted or being availed to us by PUCL is globally noticed, since the credibility of PUCL, its stature throughout the world is well known. Do we have to relook at every single line? Do we have to make a statement of our own? I think this is something that we will be hearing from Professor Bimol today. Even I'm looking at, or I'm eagerly waiting to hear to Professor Bimol's observations, both from academic and of course from all the facts and figures that he's so well acquainted ever since this very tragic event began in our own state. So many lives are affected, our own lives are affected. As I always have said, that it is not the cut which is very deep, it will take a long time to heal. If it is a physical cut, it will heal, notwithstanding the time, but there will be a scar of that wound. But what happens to our spiritual, emotional, intellectual, and of course, the very survival of many, many people who are here affected by this very conflict? What makes it more important is how stories are being told outside by people, how our stories are being narrated through their own prism, through their own eyes, quite detached from the reality. When we tell a story outside, when I meet my colleagues outside the state, having to narrate what has happened in Manipur, they look at me, they do not simply believe because I belong to an affected community, which they presume is the majority community. I think that is the very crux of what has been happening, the very point that we understand in this very report by PUCL. I would request each and every one of you present here. I would also urge those who are watching this program, I suppose this is going live, I would urge those who are watching this program, would like to listen to Professor Bimol very carefully, try to digest the contents of his speech. I was talking to some of my colleagues yesterday, and in fact, I was in Nagaland day before yesterday when Professor Bimol called me up, asking me to come to Imphal because he will be speaking to an audience. I was very honored by his call, saying that I should be chairing a session, though I don't think I do not deserve that very chair. However, I arrived yesterday. I will also try to understand what his perspectives are. In that process, that will give the capacity, that will give us a strength to put forward our views, our opinions, when we also meet our own colleagues outside this state. I would like to call on Professor Bimol to take on this very important session. I would like all of you to kindly put your mobile on the silent mode. I would like each and everyone to pay attention. I would also, after his speech, welcome for interaction. I welcome Professor Bimol. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Manipur University Student Union and Research Scholar Association of the University, and Angomcha for chairing the session. You must have seen in the last few days there has been commotion in our state, different kind of responses to this report by PUCL. And you may take this as a part of that response to this report. For today, I have picked up, this is my response, a little detailed. You must have also sensed that I've written a letter to the PUCL, and they have also responded yesterday, and I'll be replying back today. And this is the first of a series of lectures that I intend to do across the country regarding the PUCL report. The purpose of today's address may differ a little bit from what I intend to do in metropolitan cities, including Delhi. So today, as I'm addressing my own people here, I'll be speaking part of my speech in Manipuri. And those who are watching, I know many people are eager to see, especially these controversies that have happened on this report. Especially, I must begin by saying that I thank PUCL for replying to my letter, and I am ready to accept. I intend to invite them, not only here in Manipur, but also in other places, next time when I have this kind of a public engagement. Because whatever is written is in the public domain, and it must also be responded publicly, not through private communication. So what I intend to do today is, if PUCL report is a text, then we need to set up a context to understand it. I often give this example, the relationship between, if you try to understand, this is something that I often give. If you want to understand Kathakali dance and the movement of the eye as the text of performance, that is something that you are interested to decipher, then you need the face of the performer, you need the mask, you need the costume of the performer, and the characters. All of them are required to comprehend the expression in the eye. If you remove these contexts, the costumes, the face, the mask, and if you leave only the eye, you will not be able to understand fully what this expression in that eye means. So that is the relationship between text and context. The text is something that we are trying to understand, and the context is required to comprehend that text. So first of all, you need to understand, as Angomcha has already flagged up, PUCL is a very respected organization and very influential organizations, and they have been defending human rights, including questions on Manipur's experience vis-a-vis with APSPA and so on. Many of the members, I know them personally. And that is one of the reasons why I feel all the more disturbed. If it is anybody else who have written such kind of a report, I would not have bothered to respond. It's like the trolls on my social media. I don't normally respond to them. It's not important. But what I've decided to respond is for two reasons. Because this organization matters in our public discourses as a part of civil society. As you know, that the chairman of this jury is a former judge of the highest court in this country, the Supreme Court. And two other members were high court judges. They're renowned professors who have worked for decades on various areas in social sciences. And despite this composition in their earlier works, I kept on wondering when I see this. There are certain things that I was expecting it, and I was also hoping that they would take a much more reflexive approach while dealing with these issues. Because it is not an event that had finished. It's not like a riot which has been over, that is, a crisis has been over. People have settled down, and it is a post hoc commentary on the event. This is an ongoing part. So in that case, this report has become a part of the process of the crisis. It is not outside of it. As many famous historians would say, writing nationalist history is not outside of the nationalist movement. It is inside the movement. It is part of the nationalist movement. In other words, when we think about national movement, history of national movement, one must understand that it is part of that nationalism, that is part of that nationalist movement. This is a fairly well-known idea among historians. In a very similar sense, this report by the PUCL is not outside of the conflict. It is part of the conflict. That's the first thing that we need to note. This is not an external observation to a phenomenon. It is part of the phenomenon. And the truth of this reality is the manner in which the Kukis have responded and the Meiteis have responded to this. And I wish and I desperately hope that the authors of this report realize this. They are not outside of the conflict. They are part of the conflict. And which side they take, despite their self-belief, and I would suppose still, I will still give them that element of benefit of doubt. I will not jump into conclusion like who financed them. The narco-terrorists must have financed them, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to fall into that trap. That could come up later on, if required. But as of now, the first important thing to realize is that, as I'm repeating it, this is part of the conflict, not outside of the conflict. And the truth of this is what I have just said. The manner in which various civil society groups, political class have responded to it, be that Kuki politician, Kuki civil society organization, Kuki civilians, or the Meitei civilians, or the Meitei CSOs and the Meitei politicians. That must tell them that they are not someone sitting in Delhi, Mumbai, or Hyderabad, or in JNU campus, or Delhi University campus, or in IICs, or in Habitat Center in Delhi's. They are part of this problem now. And they have to be aware of the fact that what they do is bound to have an effect in the entire process, including of what they are presuming to be a peace process. And one of the important dimensions in which they get implicated in this crisis is a component part of this crisis, which is the disinformation and the information, the effort to have a narrative control on what, why, how, and wherefore of this problem. They are commenting on that, whether they admit themselves or not. Maitailonda hairaga ko Iran siki part ama oirabane reports. It's not outside of it. Nahange koi ni inariba mayam sina riot ama thokraba matungda investigation happened. Tisan kosan nan tawraga kamai tawna thokibano hairaga report ama iraga pirakpana te. Sigi report iriba sabsa akoi ki thoiba crisis sigi part ama oirabane. They may not be Kukis or they may not be Meiteis. They may be a Bihari, they may be a Maharashtrian, they may be a Tamil or anybody, but they are part of the problem now. Sigi problem se kamai oira no hairagati. Thoiba Iran siga yamna important of a component ma yauri sikaino the information war ne. Narrative amakanda tawre hek over the Guinea. Iran sikana na kamaina tawdana karamba kanda kamaina thole ino haibagi contestation ama la avane. Which have allowed the conflict to linger on. Highly but narrative control to none of one of Iran's command or no Hinamasigi, lean about Hon'ble Maraks, the Moish Yaushal Avenue was it. They've also jumped into the bandwagon of this narrative war. Maduna Neba Quenozik. First thing, they are ethically implicated in our crisis. What they speak, if the hatred continues, they will be responsible. If they are able to craft the peace process, they will also be impossible. Not as an outsider or a mediator, but part of the problem. That's what the first thing that PUCL must understand what they are doing right now. And I've said, my complication, Sigi, examples again. What is the proof of this? Is the way in which the Kukis and Meiteis have responded differentially to their report. They must reflect on this. Why Meiteis and Kukis have responded to their report differently. That is the narrative war that has been going from day one. That's the first thing that drags me, that this report cannot be just dismissed like any other organization doing things on Manipur. Sigi matang sida. Second important part, aikoina yengba matamda. A text is produced. I say, I'm speaking in English because some of them may be hearing this because it is live stream. Otherwise, my earlier plan is to speak to you in our mother tongue. So I'll be mixing these two in between. I'll be writing a letter as I've said it today because some of their reply smacks of what I consider an arrogance that thinks that others is saying something, so we don't care. We will be just bullshitting. And I use this word called bullshitting not as expletives. There's a famous philosopher in Princeton University called Harry Frankfurt. He wrote a famous essay called On Bullshit. Liars and bullshitters are two different things. Amarom the yeng. Oy the bangang mamisidin truth si respect however. Aduna ne mamano oy the bangang is. Achum by sikari no isa. Oy the bangang mamising sin respect however. Aduna ne mamano oy the bangang. These are liars. They respect truth. Bullshitters do not respect truth. Nang kaidoge hay no dune. Openly, they will say something, We are familiar with it. Many of this, right-wing politicians and Modi government, they often bullshit. They don't lie. Because they can tell you straight, something we know it is false, they will still speak. This is a characteristic of this right-wing government that rules this country. Some of the Godi media is exactly doing that. So this is bullshitting. It is a feature of what people call it post-truth world, where truth doesn't matter, but perception is more important. Emotional component of the message and how you feel. The manipulation of your emotion, your perception matters more than determining what is truth. This is what in social science we call it today as post-truth. Bullshitting is a peculiar aspect of this post-truth world. It is exactly why our conflict, the tragedy in our state, the crisis, is all the more serious. Because emotions management and perception is what people are doing it. And they will be packaging things in a way that we have. I'll be citing some of the examples and what had happened over the last 2 years. So, what second aspect that we need to understand is what I'm saying is, This is narrative war, but it is a part of a perception management, a characteristic marked by bullshitting and emotional arousals. They do that, and they use all techniques to do this, to produce certain kind of a desired effect. And I feel terribly sorry that the PUCL, despite eminent scholars within that, they have committed a big blunder, according to me, and I have given an example, a hint to them. And surprisingly, they have the audacity to tell me to go through the entire report, despite having reminded them that I don't have the time to go into the specifics of the report in the letter. And I will be telling you as well as them that why I choose a particular component of that one. It is part of a research methodological strategy while you are responding and analyzing a text. And I have reminded them number and what is that photograph that you have shown of the Meitei victims. So the issue that I was raising is not about Meitei victim or Kuki victim though. Picture, there is a slightly different arguments that I was doing, which disturbs me all the more why they did it. I'll be coming back to it. So such kind of thing, to say that when I say that there are 17 in numbers, you have shown the dead bodies, the victims of cookies in the entire report, and not a single one. And I said, thankfully, I thank you for not showing the dead bodies of Meiteis. I'll get back to you why I said that. So we need to know that this in narrative control, this time we have lot of bullshitting and perception management has been done. And I don't know whether you have this video. Is it connected? I have given the organizers video clippings. I'll tell you one more thing here. So take, for example, in the afternoon of 3rd of May, you see images of people when the violence happened in Torbung areas with sophisticated assault rifles. And those images, and then houses being burned down, and people running away here and there, those images were flashed on social media. And I know, even though I was in Delhi, I said, what the heck? This is not a normal violence of community fighting with sticks and bamboos and slingshots and so on. There are sophisticated assault rifles. That image was used as showing that Meitei's armed men disrupting peaceful tribal rally on social media, the then Twitter, including under a particular name of a well-known writer, activist. Such kind of manipulation was there from the day one. What is the consequence of that? Image is that people in Imphal particularly, that violence with the gun, what was the psychology think of that day? Those of you, especially Meiteis in Imphal. Or if you are a different community, think your community houses have been burned down there with sophisticated arms and mobs running amok there and hitting here, burning things, women and children running around, running away from those violence. Or men saying, "No, Meitei Masanatra, come, you come, if you are a Meitei blood, come and defend." There are so many of them. You have seen those images. That create a particular emotional thing here in Imphal. And I said, one of the first things that the government should have done, I have said this on my first interview, which was telecasted on a national level, was on 21st of May, not even a month after the crisis. In an interview that I gave to the print, I told them the government should have cracked down and made the necessary arrangement, because you should know that if those images are bound to have a retaliatory violence against the other community. We were going like this. At least I was going like that. This report has nothing to speak about this. For them, it is a clear-cut violence started in Imphal and its adjoining areas, and cookie houses were burned down. And there is retaliatory violence against the Meiteis in Churachandpur. So you realize that this report, as I said, is part of that information war, whether you like it or not. So this is some of the examples. I'll go specifically to the other component of how to engage with this text. And I have already said these two important things, because you are not commenting on something outside of the crisis. Whatever you speak should also be very careful, very cautious when you respond to this text. Because if you want peace and normalcy to return and justice to prevail in our state, then your response to this particular report by PUCL, you should have a very measured way of, however as provocative this report is to you. But you should call it out in a measured fashion. And fear no. You should call a spade a spade. How should we analyze this text? There are certain ways which I follow normally as a student of social science when I analyze a text. As I said, text and context. And some of the ways to understand is what we often call discursive analysis, critical discourse analysis. There's another method we often use called frame theory. And each of these methods you use, and then you will realize one specific pattern in this report. They said that this report is based on deputation and testimonies and so on. And how they use it, the words they use, what kind of impression they create, the order in which the events are organized, the chapters are organized. There are issues with that, and that is where I have commented and given them. I'll be sharing with you some of those critical aspects and to make you understand why this report is problematic. Before that, we also need to know that whatever is written in this text, you can't just brush it aside. There are recommendations given. on relief games and rehabilitations. I welcome their recommendation for an SIT, but I was asking for more than that. For me, I have asked for a JPC, Joint Parliamentary Committee, to investigate. That will show the seriousness of the government of India towards the crisis. Because the executive's actions should be held accountable to the legislature. They should be subjected to legislative oversight function. A JPC. I'm happy to inform you, including our leader, former CM Ibobi, had written on these issues to constitute JPC. So we welcome SIT, even that is okay. Because accountability must be fixed, including for writing such reports. It must be held responsible. But as a civil society group, I said that some people feel offended when I say, I'm not going for an FIR. What is important is to call them out and engage. And since you know that it is a narrative war, you are not responding to the PUCL's report only. You are responding to the narrative, the twisted narrative. You will lose track if you concentrate on this report only and without realizing that this is part of a larger narrative game plan or a narrative process. You will be losing track. So your ideas should be very clear. You need to call them out specifically where they go wrong. And I was expecting, and I still have, that the letter yesterday gave me a sense that the fortitude, the sincerity that I was expecting may not come forth now. Because the tone and tenor of the way they wrote the letter to me tells me that they were not ready to do things. They're already set up things to speak in a particular manner. So when you use, let me explain some of these issues called, what is frame theory? When you use, in analysis, when you frame something, the interpretation and the informations acquire certain specific meaning. A famous saying that I have reminded in one of my first, I think it's my first response to this report on my social media, when I said facts do not stand on their own. Some people don't understand, but many of you, that's why I said, especially our students, research scholars here, you need to know that facts do not stand on their own. It's a famous metaphor which says facts are like sacks. Bora gumbane. Bora se matunda lepangam dedana. The sacks don't stand on its own. When you put something like rice or something, then the sack will stand up. Bora se karigumba khara hapsal matunda lepangam bado adune. Facts there, they don't stand on their own. Haina. This example you will see, those of you from history, in E.H. Carr's famous book, What is History? So facts don't stand on their own. Perspective amala akanda never fact ki magi meaning ama acquired a race. Only when the facts are put within a particular perspective, then it begins to speak. And E.H. Carr famously said that facts don't speak. We make them speak for us. By putting those perspectives, the facts will speak for us. So take, for example, Inglo-Kuki War, the Mai Tharame, in itself, it's a fact, but what does it mean? Maitay na Tharame akoy do usitaba, usitaba inter-community ki relationship ki tension na magi manungda, hapsal lakanda, get the Mai Tharame, habidugi, wahang tok, madugi meaning do full form the lakadoine. Mai Tharame, habidu kakta Kaidore angang hena tharam mira, sweram mira. My angang is hanamaga, hurala, what I am a kenu cow and tharam mamale, hiragadi. It acquires a very different meaning of tire burning in that gate. It is the narrative, this is the perspective which makes the speak to speak differently. That's what historians were saying. That's what social scientists often say. That facts don't stand on their own. It is our perspective which makes them speak. So framing is like putting a perspective. And it produces certain kind of consequences in your knowing. Say, immediately you will begin to see women as broken face and Ainhan reel lamawi. Very humorous reel. Mabung sinamagi machanupi mayumda lakpada machanupi se mabung na gift of the low get of the mabung sina my machanupi se mamit nama dark spot or kamaga uba. I was black. Kana humnakin na tin bagi somebody has punched her eyes. A mabung sin saw na bedroom lum the changchan katoy no piece na ya leba ko. Man's housing and the magi Masen Nupa the Ramais and the Puri cinema and the Tong Semana Tat Hangoka the Masen Nupi Nupase, Bendies Elgam High Po Magalera Manunga. Framings. When you frame something as like Nupamaga Nupimga Kanari Haimatamda, any information you will have a predisposition to interpret in a particular manner. That's the framing. Video Libra, Pravin Swami gi video Riaubra. No ready to sa. Anyway, I quite see Kang the Bagi port as Obama no framing se. When you frame something, then it is, say, trivial and non-trivial, minority and a majority, then entire information events will speak differently. You're predisposed to interpret your facts in a very different manner. The facts of the events will acquire different meanings. So trivial and non-trivial, majority, minority. This is a kind of a framing that you do, and it gives you a particular direction to interpret. Subconsciously or otherwise, you will begin to interpret something differently. That's framing. So when you respond to a text, you must see how this text is being framed, how it frames things. I'll give you a couple of examples from the report, and you will see the discomfort that many Meiteis feel and why many cookies are happy with the report. And correspondingly, where, in that case, the writer and this text stand in that relationship. Do they stand on the Meitei side, or do they stand on the cookie side? If the text stands on the cookie side, why the Meitei will be happy with us? If it is on the Meitei side, how will cookie respond to that one? So the partisanship that I was talking of it, and by saying that they are part of the problem, it is inherent in the way the empirical fact is the response that you get it now. If it has taken within court a neutral positions and trying to put certain facts and figures up front, then you will have a very different things. Or even if you think in a particular contestation, you think one is wrong and one is right. In a conflict situation, how do you go about dealing with that? That's a huge responsibility. I am not saying that neutral doesn't mean that in reality there's somebody is being done wrong too. You can't be neutral in that sense. But if your investigation on an action turns out to be somebody has done something wrong, then obviously that report writing is bound to reflect some. So the assumption that they have is that somebody is wrong, and that is why this contestation is. And how that thing is being produced is not so much because of the investigation and its truth, but the manner in which this report frames things. That's why frame theory is very important for us to look at how this report is being framed. Second, if you look at critical discourse analysis, there are manner in which the report uses metaphors, rhetorical style, the syntactical structures The use of word, the sentence, the paragraph formations, all of that will come. And you will see certain picture gets differently produced. So these are the two tools that you will see. The third aspect which comes from this school would be something like, how the writing style. This is how we often do it, and I'll be giving you now, once I finish this, the premise of my engagement with this text. Adu hairakanda kadai da kamai frame tauke si yengse. And you will see how this report is being framed. And their choice of word. It reveals far more than what is written. And then people think that this is what is there on the literary text itself. But the manner in which these things have been organized and framed. For instance, there is a way of looking at news report or this kind of report. Inverse pyramid model, they say. The important things will be written in the earlier first phase when people are reading it, and unimportant things will be just pressed aside towards that. So it's an inverse pyramid. You will spend much more time highlighting this, positioning it up front, and you'll just dismiss it in the footnote or otherwise. And this report suffers from that. Deliberately pushing something as a footnote, not using in the main text, and so on. The other one is the eagerness, the biases comes from when you use certain materials without even understanding what that material is. And you will be shocked to know this. I'm pretty sure that they may not even understand. Because there is a picture of a social media comment. And they describe it as anti-cookie. Without realizing that that particular comment, we don't know who's he. After all, in social media, we don't know who's he. But from the content, when you read, that particular comment is saying that Meiteis should stop taking cookies as poppy planters and drug dealers and or illegal immigrants. And I am saying this as a Khongsai macha ama oina. As a Khongsai cookie, I'm saying that do not do this kind of a communal taking of cookies as poppy planters and illegal immigrants. The comment says. And it goes on to say that, yes, I'm a cookie, but I'm ready for NRC. But Zabro Haima. Are you ready to include Meitei Pangal and Meitei from Bangladesh? When you do NRC, then I'm also ready to do NRC and Kamenam Yaweba. And that was given as an anti-cookie sentiment represented in that post. Is it an anti-cookie statement? This post is saying that do not communalize, brand us as illegal immigrants or poppy planters. I am a cookie. And I am ready to face NRC if you are ready to incorporate Pangals, Mayangs and the Meiteis from Bangladesh or anywhere. You decide whichever the cutoff you are, I am ready. And I will not going to run away even if I am a cookie. But do not act like a hero on social network. That word is also used. Don't act like a hero branding us as illegal immigrants and poppy planters. And that post, which was written in Roman script in Meitei Lawn, and you can see the choice of words tells you that it may not be a Meitei. Zabro is a peculiar way of asking of a particular kind. And that was presented in this paper as a report as a, see, for example, this is an anti-cookie sentiment. Do you really think that that was an anti-cookie sentiment? Or a cookie throwing off a challenge to the others and appealing them, don't act like a hero on social network by branding us illegal immigrants and such. Will these judges and professors and others, I wonder, how come they make such kind of a blunder? You have taught in universities for decades, supervising students. You do not even know how to check this, which is written in Manipuri. You should have taken help from someone to understand what is the content of that. Simply there is a word cookie there. You think that anything cookie, then it's anti-cookie. Because it was a response to, within quote, Maitai revivalist radical group. So anybody who responded, them must be anti-cookie. Without even bothering to check what is that comment, they publish in their report it as a comment that shows anti-cookie sentiments. That is the kind of blunder that people do. You're so obsessed with a particular way of saying things. So if you look, this is a very exhaustive paper. You might be threatened. 694 pages. And if you read the way a social science students like me will read, you will take more time. See, what I do is I have a first reading first, second that I go on and I started deciphering. Third, I check with my research assistant again. Is this right? Is this okay? You know, remember that part. What did they say there? So we have a brainstorming and discussions and you write it. It will be very threatening for us. And without realizing these, that's why I said, you need to know how to engage with these texts and why. I have begun this talk today with the why part of it. That is part of it. It is part of our narrative war. And they are either creating problems and how different people have responded would mean different kinds of things to them. Now look at this. One of the ways when you use these things, the different kinds of framing, I'll give you one example when they said the crux of this report, there is 4 parallel things they have talked about. Yes, it's in the first. That is, it is in page 105. It is the 4th chapter. Just, framing. Okay. No. Do you have that Praveen Swami's video? Play that one. I want to show not from this report how framing is done. Once I shared this on my social network once. Akhoi missing the masibu uram gidrene sumain to race boy na tagalorga isa ina usa larik pau larik tama mathok tai hairo kangbu umno masidai sida chairak po akampe ngangbo togiba video mate motke India gi afau analysis ni strategic analysis afau ai framing se moina to se kamai to gi ngoba kaino ma haibse without saying it somebody can say meaning se hide na kaino mo haibim se framing na kamai produce to ge se yengoba is ready. It's not connected. I mean, music ki film the later, bra. I'm udresida. World Cup talk later, no sir. We have system to set up to ronge demo. Framing, this is one example of how subtle way of picking up and organizing materials. Event ma'am se kamai karam framing the organized or meanings is why hydra sudum chatpayavagi framing se kamai shape togese. This is how when they write newspapers or articles, you do that often. Yadrabo. Ngal semo. Let me continue what I was saying. You know, events of violence, chapter number 4. You know, one of the things that I must begin with this first. Nangi sigi magi chapter se. There's 12 chapters in this report. Asigi report chapters the magi matang setting the context, chapter number 1, and Manipur the states the demographic karigi port kamaina present a week I see yaw whenever. See, this is some factually error but which has a bearing. I'll give example once these things are ready. Are you ready? Same guy. Tabro. No, I can't hear. Ladi. Asin ang microphone do ya bro. Ya ina. Adu din ang kada wino tadi to magi laptop ki thamam to thamuya tro. Nang site ta thamedu na ni.
Covering the grass with the ashes of centuries of learning and literature. For hours, fragments of burning paper.
See, akoigi bus thabagi event am tawge na bus selalanin tawgi do adu kandai da print ki kenoni adai da work tawne man se maming am tin chatpa strategic analysis the India gi mas influential am nu pane ba magi program ne magi se March in adai da ne 2024 male in kan ba ar magi framing se kamai horoki em mo ko ai mai tai ron da hana hayo ge sigi my sounds clear oi mane ma hain sineba sigi April sida sahi kharagi mamang da governor gi fasagraba loan do lampak tu da che chak pagi mai am tai sineba ufun olaga koi gi kariba koi gi kaurisim koi gi che chak pe le mo buse kangoi ka Angoi may amparga governor ki loan se mothale kari kino da radical maitai kangbu kharana library mai thabadagi larik may amangan gare sigi same April sida adu matam du mangi du larik ni du same mai duna mai admaina sakhi du di larik khaktani mangi ba du huji khanda ke April sida tawrisa ji mioi boina siri ne sigi mai chak pada aduna matam du su kaim tawgi de fa gi de du huji su adu kam ajum tawgna laisine ba see the hidei ba was the framing je kamai tawgi na da destruction mai chak ba traditional mangi ba radical maitai kangbu do. Now, second example is that even you don't say maitai radical haidasu ataba miduna kai hairage da oh sigi cha ise radical maitai na tawani haibase adum implicit when chakedo in the text. This is setting up, this is framing how you narrate. Yam the innocuous oiba man ba adu ina framing sit tawra ise ngoi na ina thagalu neba aikoigi press da aigi social media da pen da kolom na kari kana doino nga kai dok doino ira kai kana doino to ina khoino gyan ta hokte haisi aikoini iu bugi ngang bungam hokda bugi mina ngang bu sum targa adugi opinion du da yumfam moira kan da policy matters influence of seleisa ngang bungam da ba ngang ba haita ba I bangam da ba I ba yaw bangam da ba ngang pham phang da ba adumaina marginalize orga exclude tawraga thamba dagi aikoina ngang bangam hokda bane ba se feminist na su haidana aikoigi feminist na su haiba wane ba se akoigi dagi loilam gi makhada leiba mina su haiba aikoi se khatu thamam ni na colonizer sing du na aikoigi maram da ngang pasu in chat lei ba khoi se kana no khoi problem se kai noina adigi suna kan feminist na haisu nupa sing aikoigi maram da ngang ga dum lei na nupi si sini moina pam si sini na taw du na dum taw lei na aikoigi ngang ba lei tra mina moi gi dunia am dum hingre ba aduna ni moina kari haire anti-colonial movement natraga anti-patriarchal movement lakanda you speak otherwise you will be spoken about you write otherwise you will be written about I koin huzik to say we have been written about by them and spoken about us by them sina shape tawrine whether it is within the parliament or it is outside of the parliament, sigi public sphere gi space there is the space phangdaba marginal oine inthoga thamgi badagi akhoi gi world view leitabne asina never why one of the reasons why we need to respond to such kind of a report ekai dong tu no na intho le yate adagi kamai tong engage tawgani du ge ne ngasa ina haijare kana no irei bi mi sing kana kana no kamai na respond tawgani makhoi gi influence or ba sector sing du ne ngasa haijare thu changa ga hojik taw ma thau ta na du ngang ngam ba tai ngang i bo ase makhoi na ngang i bisda akhoi na name calling ka we ma di aduni ma di adane se ma hai ba mi du na ngang i bo wa du da na te that will survive because you are only attacking the person. And personalized of the vida, moigi content do never coin who look at The narrative. That narrative is the target of the me, the name calling, the moi di aduni, ma di adani, moi adu tawisa. Masi doesn't get you far. What is important is to debunk what is written. The wrong ones. If they are good ones, we say this is good. If you have committed some wrong, we must tell them this is wrong. Adugi framing dugi akoigi events the kamaina constant in national media sida tauna na leiraba framing mayam siga sigi reports isu it's part of that one only. Taudana the lab chahi ani the narrative word the framing taudana in a peculiar way the uhan lab mayam say hujik so tum tanthara ineba duna nenga size PUCL gi reports katuna te koina respond to say it is to the narrative war. It is that narrative control to adugi battle to ne koina thengari size. Just see, this is a renowned person and a national media and
For hours, fragments of burning paper drizzled on the perfectly manicured lawns of the Raj Bhavan in Imphal, covering the grass with the ashes of centuries of learning and literature. 2 decades ago this April, activists of a Meitei radical group seeking to eradicate the Bengali script from their homeland with matches and buckets of kerosene set fire to the Manipur State Central Library. Estimates suggest some 145,000 books, some of them priceless manuscripts, were lost in the arson. No one was ever caught or punished. Libraries are a small, even trivial loss compared to the lives lost, the brutal violence, and the ethnic cleansing Manipur has faced since 2023. Yet, the burning of the library offers an opportunity to reflect on the forces that engendered the ethnic warfare and consider how they might be engaged and finally still.
Pan gibra second gi example the handa ki thoiba mi si da kanana tawuno is pan gibra. It doesn't mention. But comparisons it draw tawre. Amadu su mai thagi mangi edu kanam tu suphagi di edu adu mai tawduna handa kisidi lari khar mangi ba gidu ke amthina khene sidi mi si ba yaura in aduna thoi ibe irang sa masi kamai tawduna investigate tawgani karmai tawna lefan gani mans kamai chathara inu haiba forces singa cha naina ge hai taraga di akoi masi mathau tai hen haira ineba. But nangi framing sidi already ngasai gi radical mai te ina thai ja koina 2 events haija ba yo aduna amana pusin jagra di loira neba. Sumaina implicit manner the wahi kuzin season of a mawong, the way you organize your text, the manner in which words are being used, informations are being shared. Sigi port mayam se. I koigi sigi text se pa the madu haibam changeba nangna line by line, facts by facts kind of do because once you understand and the facts don't stand on their own, is a peculiar way of organizing that, is a peculiar way of presenting them, your choice of word, the manner in which the text is organized, all of them you need to understand when you respond. Kay the muine ya muktana ga hakaneba tell us factually incorrect ones ka hakaneba. It's a trap. Not every factually incorrect ones doesn't matter, but there are some incorrect ones which have repercussions. But far more important is facts the habsan griba magi narrative style the neighbor. Say for example in this report, factually wrong, they said there are 36 scheduled tribe communities in Manipur. One might ridicule that, oh, you are doing a work on Manipur, even you don't know how many scheduled tribes are there in Manipur. You don't know, you only, you said that there are 36 of them. Actually there is 34. You might use in a rhetorical style by saying that you don't even know how many scheduled tribe communities are here. But that is not as a profound thing as the other mistakes that they make. The blunder that I have given you one example of social media report. And you need to know mine organize or is chapters detailed matang 12 chapters. Loirak padamana epilogue amasu hapiba. Mamang the executive summary and the chapakanda marak the main content body is at level. So hujik aina uning ay se hogi sigi framing sida nasagi 4 parallel ke nota udong to ulo. This is in page number 105. set up toro ini ngasa event sing je kamaina narrate toro ke du yeng bio video de lak trbo no hana set up toro thamo du ga I achanga sida moino jai je tracing the event sahib. You are trying to trace the event. Irang sikram kanda haura I hai basa. Again, perspective changeb. Say when you trace back the events, the Second War was a kamai haura ena nang na thiru ba matam da. Treaty of Versailles de haudori bra. Hitler coming to power de haudori ba natraga police ki the border da German ki kainoma moigi platoon la section gumama outpost some of the sea giver spark to other day laudori bra. Or Japan war Manipur matam da will count it when the field commander si Burma sector the na landa se koi mupin tau se na Japan ki military headquarter the ibudu de war sha hawen laudori bra tozo na law iba decision no mitu de ki laudori bra natraga ngasai gi mogi actual troop movement toroga river lamaga chatpagi tragedy madu da mogi food supply la ko kopam am ising da tau thagi bu turen ngang but the first tragedy struck tauram ne Japan war mo ni sanga kumatam da ade haudori bra natraga the first fire exchange of fire in the war. How do you write when you trace back an event? There is always a choice involved with your researchers. Depending on your theoretical perspective and your purpose, you will be choosing it. That is why modern social science tells us that Nangi researcher is independent and observer ki dichotomy se mawa log de. Every truth is historically and culturally situated. Every researcher must have a reflexivity to reflect on their assumption, their bias, their background, their ideological orientations. Or even in social science literature, Michel Foucault, you ask question A, not question B, is determined by an episteme. Nangi framework ama yawuna neba nang nahangibo question itself to framework amana knowledge ki framework amna guide to rahang aine but that you ask question A not question B adu determine to already knowledge system ama leiraga na ne bahang ai adu masigi episteme se karino aigi assumption se karino se han reflect to gadam ni reflect research to gedi I must be aware of my biases, my assumptions, and the reasons why I am choosing this topic to do research, why I am asking a particular question. You should have that clarity, and that's broadly what is the concept called reflexivity. Adule haura dedi sigi blunder si tauroi haina ain sumoi da ha me even my first response I reminded them, if you have done that you will not do this. Now, magi framing haul pasida events ki say I'll give you an example. Magi says that there are 4 antecedent to the violence ma immediate context ka piri ba mana. So one day yeng be over. Eviction and forceful demolition of tribal village followed by protests organized by ITLF. Second, Mari sina frame toroga sato in investigation. Mari sina mana kamaina karamba choose the way. Agitations and protests and advocacy by Meiteis demanding inclusion of Meiteis and Meitei Pangals in the ST list. Third, protests against the violation of the reservation norms in the recruitment at REAMS. Sigi national policy reservation the the director Santa Oiring when he was the director there was a negotiation with the striking students mayam sigi adugi yauriba precedents in violence again case Sonzang village to Ginimanas the eviction and forceful demolition and 4 in the protest meetings and advocacy by tribal groups opposing the Meitei tribal demand tortugi tawa marido asida tauraga sale da mana main oina haisi sigi hairiba ahum mari se masida common thread oina chingis na ngasai gi ST gi posina common oina mu frame amane haine ahum je tongan khanabada masi koi gi kari haine connecting them masi gi thread sing je connect taurisina ngasai gi ST gi issue sine han hai ma This is called frame. This is how you try to organize the sequence of events. Second, magi kaino se. Eviction ki se. Eviction ki matang se maung ye da. Ke Sonjang village ki agitation ma ngasai first palli ba sigi narrative se haurakan man sizu mok frame mong thang aga yeng ane ba independent of that frame yeng oi mana kari haisida reports in page 107 kari mu igeda. This incident must be understood in the context of the allegation that there is increasing illegal migration from Burma and Bangladesh into Manipur. The demand for strong administrative action against illegal immigrants was made mainly by the valley-based groups, and a number of Naga groups joined them in the demand for implementation of NRC. Hairiba poche, masisi na sigi context da yenga davne sineba. Eviction ki poche. Sonjang village ki eviction ki wari se. Accusation of illegal immigrant ni aduni haibagi port NRC ki sigi debate se masigi context ta tawraga yenga dam adu da hapchale yenga dabne haibne ba samhayab adagi tholak pane ba sidagi noini illegal ni haina accusation tawraga victimize tawna ba noina moi ta thokna ba hona bane na ne urais. Now supposing if I position the eviction in case Sonjang village, instead of this frame, if I use masi akoi ki revenue department ka forest ka department ka da official kharana mathong manam cha da badagi forest ki area the revenue pisal lamba dak chitha pisal lamba khopagi government na chief secretary na circular lay chief secretary na Taurga chairman oiraga committee ma sema kanda revenue department ka forest department ki anisi ki chamam na base kong na ba confusion between forest department and the revenue department in order to resolve that thing at the committee sema kanda survey taurakanda chumthok na bahona rakpagi part amani na chalu rakanda di nasai ki Sonjang village ki evictions it acquires a very different meaning kamai na paage sineba. This is what the importance of framing is. What they have said clearly in 107 is that the eviction of Sonjang village must be understood in the context of the allegation of illegal migration. Karigumba, if we choose to look at this event called the eviction process in Sonjang village, under the broader confusion between the forest department and revenue department, because some of the protected forests and reserve forests, dark chitapisan, and I know the revenue department says because of some corrupt official have done something, so they are trying to clarify it's not specific to Sonjang village. It was carried out throughout the state of Manipur, especially koigi nasaigi reserve forest lega valley gi karigi leiba saruk se am tawebs. Now, if you read this event in Sonjang village under this framework, then you begin to realize that cookies are not the only ones who got evicted. Meiteis also got evicted, which is a huge number. I think cookies in the government circular report, it says only 59 of them. I just must be having the data here. Say, out of 413 encroachers evicted, 59 encroachers were Kuki communities. Meiteis 143, Pangals 137, Nagas were 38, and Nepalis were 36. So, Kuki, the victimization of Kuki, the narrative would have not acquired that meaning if you change the context of reading Sonjang village eviction. But is it factual or is it infactual? Sonjang village, the eviction, is it a fact or is it a fiction? It's a fact. But that fact don't stand on its own. If you read it as they demanded that it must be read within this allegation of illegal migration, that particular Sonjang event, Sonjang village eviction will acquire a particular meaning. But if you look within the larger effort to, negotiate and correct some of this confusion that existed between two government departments called Forest Department and Revenue Department, and K. Sonjang village eviction acquires a very different meaning. But what did this author do? They chose this one. So they are implicated in the reality they produce. The reality doesn't exist out there, outside of their frame. So, eviction, is it eviction a fact or fiction? Factually incorrect, or they tell us if it is factually incorrect? So that's what I said is a trap. It's a fact that eviction happened there. But the kind of meaning that it acquires in this report would be different if you choose a different dimension to analyze this. That's how this report is. Now, strange as it seems, amata sumukari haige da sigi port mayam se moina analyze tobada deposition testimonies of the people, newspaper report, documents by the tribal organizations, my pibako sigi aige research kambusina staple tau the pairing turing tok salamane tawris aduna moina parang turing tok salamis da adida maning de awle mamang de hawu fose psm tungan hap le I know the Heiser is okay. Moina kahageda. We base these narrations. Moina hani evidence kai de loge. Where do they collect this narrative to build up this sourcing? The kai de loge da. Moina have it includes government circulars and orders. Sonjang village ki incidents in of the government ki they said that they rely on government circulars and orders. But I have some of these circulars issued by the government of Manipur, both a clarification on the Sonjang incident or otherwise. Ngasai ki talk about government, all the orders and others, you don't find this in this report. Why? You said that you will be relying on the orders, which is in the public domain. On that incident, they don't choose. Sige talk about circular, just get clarification from the Forest Department. Even this was, I was told in a newspaper, you see ministers clarifying this. In government orders and circular, these official documents, they don't mention. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative they want to tell. Aduna neamkhan ko. Factually incorrect, if it is factually incorrect, tell us. They haven't told us. It's a trap. Sonjang incident happened. You said it happened, so I can't say it is false. It happens, but the meaning that it acquires is because of a particular framing that you have done. And so much so that despite saying in your own report that you will be using documents and orders and circulars of the government, forest ki clarifications inang used out there. Why? Isn't it bias? Pick and choose. You're doing that. Now, magi ngasai victim of the tribal kaisin kadai da muktawgeda. Let me turn to the choice of the word mayamse. You will see right from the beginning when it kicks off. Ay nangarang letter the moini is they don't understand. There is something called primacy effect and the recency effect. It's a well-known psychological finding. People tend to remember what was presented at the beginning and at the end. In between, you tend to forget. Human tendency is that you tend to remember what was presented to you at the beginning or at the end. The same thing happens in lecture. Aduna ne koi na public speaking ai thi oza su eraga sigi training the management so di tak pasalamin ai at the beginning of my career. 90s, early 90s horak management the tak salamems. Sige si kamay na ko ni help tong ni mingon the memory si phan ge hai ta ri wa ngang man da ko na sign post pi wai na taw. Akoigi khabar gi article if the so koina heading pe the marakta ma heading masam hapsar is it becomes something like a new beginning. And attention just sinkhatna bo honor in. There's a technique. 1 hour speech so now let me turn to this one kind of you are kicking off a new beginning, so the attention of the people is drawn. Sigi primacy and recency effect of the text. Mamang the reports said that's what people will remember more, not what you write in between. So that is why I cannot take your executive summary as an innocuous, abridged version of the report. Because that is where your motive is also reflected. Because you know that when you write that, that's what most people will remember. In that, the kind of word they use, the way you have explained the phenomenon, is what is problematic. That's why executive summary is an important part. Don't say that, जो constitution में article number 1 से शुरू हुआ है उसे करो. I want the like पाव है ऐसे फसना पाव का ना मनुंगा. I ना मुखोई तो पी की दूधी नसाई की primacy and recency effect तो की लोकट पनी मनुंग तो सुनेंगे नसाई पिरे इचना वाला मनुंगे example में हमने नसाई पिकला इचना. मोई के क्या हम साथी के the arrogance ने हारे इचना. ओजाओ है रगा लहीर चाहिए कुंठा है ना तागला बम अपम तो लहीर अब. I want the Natun Nami meet Kui guy, Begit type, the Ranuinta race, I have power. No in a curry, Kangdu, no kind of patronizing over Manmama. It was Animang, it's a kind of basis of your many have we request you to read in detail. I am reading and giving you examples from within. But you must also know your motive is reflected in your executive summary. Because you kicked off, you set off. This is like the right wing WhatsApp University does. They will say something wrong about it on WhatsApp, spread the news. The moment you try to correct it, the research have shown it. 10,000 videos, the correction 25% information. So misinformation continues, disinformation continues. You say, I should now vote so I give an example. When Amit Shah was giggling in one of his, leaked video. During the election, they have this disinformation campaign that Mulayam Singh Yadav ka masanupa kupang thana. Bot kanan manak naksala kanuda. Adi ka Samajwadi ki machim now if Mulayam Yadav and Akhilesh Yadav slapping. Then I said, Magi Walker Singh confidence mang to never. Santu edo BJP na. It's spread out. Adugi leak video ni is still available on YouTube. Adu kaida urage to what happened? Jo karna tha, jo kaam jo karna tha, wo to kar diya na hai na. Ako'y na phanga daw ba result to di phanga, ako'y na pamjaba port to di phangre na nga out na chena dra mayam se confidence mahangi to di ako'y tawlu to di hare dun even if it's wrong. So that is what, even if I made wrong, then what they're going to say that we are part of this game of narrative setting up. That's why Kuki are supporting us. That's why Maitais are against us. I am saying this. This is what the attitude is. If you do that. Aduna, executive summary, the Thariba Potuga, both the executive, I'll give you 1 or 2 examples of how that setting is not only in the executive summary of the report, but it is also inside the text. I just read out Ngasagi executive summary, the first 2-3 paragraphs, so you can see. You see terms like Ngasagi, what you say is konala ki manga sai violence kamai horaki such mira use story I am seeing be over. Tribunal presents overwhelming evidence of targeted killings, destruction of homes and places of worship, sexual violence and forced displacement and blah blah. It describes the emergence of ethnic enclaves, mass looting of weapons of police armories. These are seemingly facts. These are facts. But what, how and wherefore, the sequence that you have presented. See, they use the provocative state action, ST declared, this is choice of word. The moment you said that the decision of this High Court was provocative, Is it provocative to the Meiteis? Is the decision of the High Court on ST, does it come as a provocation to Meiteis? Please tell me. It is no. So the moment you have defined a judgment as provocative, you're already positioning yourself on one side. This I learned as a basic when I started my research work. You use the term secessionism. When I interview people, many of them said, why are you calling us secessionists? We are a national liberator. We're a freedom fighter. The moment you use secessionist movement, that means you're taking a particular position. You're looking from a particular dimension. So the words are not very neutral. So provocative actions, instead of saying, like there's a hardcore that leads to a, tension between the two communities, then you are objectively saying something, right? But the moment you keep on using this qualifying word, there are ample examples if you do that. These are sometimes we forget that these meanings doesn't make much sense. But you are already revealing your position. As I've given you example, when a feminist says something like this, who says that cooking is a sole, work of the women? It can be done by the men also. Relationship feminist. But my husband is very good. He helps me in kitchen work. The term helps. You're reproducing the old belief that this is the work of the women. Nasagi na tawda di help na tebo. So when you choose a word, you produces an inherent meaning. See, the way the language is used, the sequence, there is the manner. So if you're looking for factually incorrect, again you will miss. See the choice of the word, how this report has done. And I said that is why one group in this crisis is happy with this report and another group is not happy. And they think that they are non-partisan. Now look at this. I'll give you framing I'm coming to choice of word. How the words are used. Inside the text, they write determining violence. Kadai de kamai hauraki aba violence I khoi tawba matamda masi thigatpa matamda ne yang wai sinimana report sinaise quensi nungai gidreda ani se samnar hap ka tongan hap lerame. Anyway, I'll just read it. The way this papers is organized by my people is all messed up. Page number 3 anyways. Semana have it. Inside the text, how and where the violence began, which group instigated it has been an extremely contentious question. It has been difficult for any non-partisan report and even experts who testify to the tribunal to ascertain the accurate chain of events. How and where and who instigated, this is a very difficult and contentious thing to say. This is what they write inside the text. Page number 161. And what they do in their executive summary, which is something that people will remember. What did he say? He said, mob rampage through Kuki settlements in Imphal and nearby areas. In Churachandpur and Kangpokpi, retaliatory violence emerged against Meitei homes and properties. This is an executive summary. Anybody who reads the text, which is likely to be remembered portion as this. And you have said something like it is a very difficult, contentious thing to say. Who instigated, where and how it started is very difficult to say and so and so. But you make a categorical statement. I'm repeating, categorical imperative sentence. And they said this is an extraction of the text. How did you come to this conclusion? And present it in your executive, and you brush it aside. This is not a general statement. This is an extraction. Are you playing with game? Extraction from what? And you think that we don't know that what is recency effect and what is primacy effect? And if this is not a conclusion that your report has done it, why did you conclude it in your summary? Chain of event way. Then the other word, this is not easy. If you are trained social science, then you will understand that critical discourse analysis, how to read the text and how the reality is shaped. Look at this line. Another thing that was said inside the text as well as in the executive summary. I'll give you another example. Kukizo communities were driven out of the valley. Compare this with other expressions. Meitei communities left tribal dominated areas. Driven out versus left. What is the difference? Driven out is somebody have forced them. And they left. Meitei left the hills. And the Kukis were driven out. This is exactly in the earlier studies on the media. We found that, this guy was killed. And 3 Meitei died in firing. Who killed? This attack, there was a report that we have analyzed it. So, Kukizo communities were driven out and Meiteis were not driven out. They simply left the tribal areas. Is this neutrality? You are already constituting what is the reality. And Sinamuk, inside the text, its repercussion is really nice. This is in the executive summary, and this is from inside the text, the chapters which they asked me to read. What they say? Look at this. The Imphal Valley and its surrounding district is close to entry of Kukizo community. It's close. They were driven out. They are close. This is inside the text. And what happened? And come to Meitei, said, road passing through the hill areas are bare to the Meitei community. Lambi chatpa yade haibo kaktani Meitei di. Meitei di lambi. Meiteis are bare from traveling on the road. Whereas in the Imphal Valley and surrounding district, those guys were stopped. They were closed the door. Does it open up that we can not, okay, highway to nahi ja sakta. We can't go on highway, but can we go back to More and settle down there or in Churachandpur and anywhere? That's how the word is being played out. Left, driven out, close, and we cannot travel on highways. It's not only about traveling in highways. Highways are cookies out of the same thing. They can't travel on highways which passes through Meitei areas. Just as the same portion of the highways Meiteis cannot go, which is under the Kuki areas. So they've said the districts are close to entry of Kukizo community and road passing through the hill areas bare to the Meitei community. And there are interesting examples like this. Valley district became Meitei stronghold, patrolled by armed youth groups. The other expression, hill district became Kukizo stronghold. Samani, Meitei stronghold, Kuki stronghold. But the difference is the qualifier. What comes in? It says, inaccessible to Meitei police and politicians. Are they trying to hide that this is equally inaccessible to the civilian Meiteis who have been displaced and linguistic in relief camps? It's not only the police and the politician. What are they playing with us? Are they neutral? Look at this word. Hill district became Kuki-Zo stronghold, inaccessible to Meitei police and politician. Does it mean that the civilians is accessible to those areas? Similarly, Valley district became Meitei stronghold, patrolled by armed. Why don't you say Valley district became Meitei stronghold, inaccessible to Kuki policemen and politicians? This armed man is one of the key trop of the narrative throughout this debate. Let me remind him, I have no love or respect for the wrongs done by the government, both in Delhi and Imphal. At the same time, any XYZ armed groups, be that in the valley or the hill, for me, I know whose role and what, but I will not pick and choose to blame one and the other's silence. In my assessment, I have raised the issue to them. What is the role of the Sioux in this problem? Just as you talk about these armed groups in the valley areas. There's a frequency analysis. I'm not going to it. This is part of textual analysis. You can do how many words have been used and in what context, which qualifying word are used, and how the meaning is shaped. That I'm not going into the detail of the textual analysis. That's for a different engagement. I'm just giving you glimpses on when you learn to do this. So, remember that we left and only politicians and policemen are inaccessible. Of course, I didn't get access to the Phagaukchoi Kai Makhale Kai Bazaar, which is also called Kangbai Bazaar. I'm a politician, so it's okay. But I am saying that why here you turn it and in the other one you talk about armed groups. If I frame, Hill district became Kuki-Zo strongholds with ISIS type of marksmen and armed men parading all the time in the city areas. If I say that, what happens then? These are the narrative one. I was expecting some people who are not part of the conflict here to give an objective assessment and see where things are going. Instead, they have put fire to the problem again. Now people started chasing in for or against this report, and they're enjoying. A report which should have avoided that one, if you have the sensitivity, without display of words, the way you frame things, if you have been objective, they should be ashamed that in a crisis which smacks of a conflict between two communities, one community appreciates you, other don't. This is a problem that they should realize. And I'm giving you why these differential responses are coming in. Now, the other part that they have mentioned, this is, I think I have more or less covered, except for the worst contentious issue that they have. This is also a very interesting part, because they continuously produce like this. You read this report and you will see, I'm just trying to give you to, especially the research scholars and my colleagues, when we read the text and why we should be responding, what is this text position is. I wanted to give you about what the issue that I've raised with them as my fourth point. First of all, you must realize one thing. In this narrative, though they said they didn't conflate, that particular epilogue, they are saying that you are picking up, they reproduce the entire paragraph. What they don't realize that I was reading that paragraph as the part of that chapter and how you have framed for the cookies, you write. Then for the Meitei side, that is where I was reading, where the introduction of a paragraph line and elaboration ends, and another idea was immediately introduced within that. There's a textual analysis. They are making a mistake on that. Betrayal of what? The promises are not kept. What promises are you talking about? Betray is what? When you have a contract, an understanding. That is where the word betrayal is used. So what is implicitly you are insinuating? Now the last point, I raised about the use of photographs, and I told you that there is a dead bodies. And what is strange, these are very well-known scholars and judges. The Global South scholars have been worried about the manner in which the dead bodies of Asian Africans are used in Western literatures and media. During the coronavirus, dead bodies floating on the river and lying down here and there in Africa and India was shown. But when the white men died, or in the European people died, they respect the dead bodies. They don't show those pictures. And recently in this another civil war-like situation in Africa, the same thing happened. And there's a heated actions between journalists from Africa, research scholar from Africa, countering New York Times. Similarly, during the coronavirus date, lot of Indian scholars were pointing fingers at European literatures. Why did you show those images? You're not showing to our dead bodies. This is nothing but racist Orientalism. You treat the other body differently. You have a double standard. You have a different way of dealing with your own body. Can you check how many times they have done this during the Delhi riot or a Gujarat? It's worth reflecting. And when the Westerners do to Indian case, you protest calling them as Orientalism and racism. And the same thing happened with us. You don't say anything. What is the response? They said, well, it is in the public domain and some of them we use it because the family permission they gave us. I wonder whether those research scholars trained in the best of the institute in this country and abroad, from my fellow Kuki community scholars, do they agree with this kind of a display of bodies? Or is it so twisted a political motive that showing those grotesque picture is a vindication of one's own narrative? And it will generate hatred and dislike for those who committed that crime. Is it a move to reduce peace and normalcy, or inciting to sustain the hatred and anger? Do you think that those images is going to give a good feeling? And you think that by publishing those photographs, you are going to bring normalcy and peace? I must remind them thus. When I was making my film, Auditorium, in 2003, some of the images that have landed up on my desk in the editing table. One was a young boy who was shot dead, blood oozing out from his head side, dark, thick blood on a stretcher in a morgue. And another lady who was brutally raped by 2 Union's armed forces personnel in front of her disabled child. And it seems thus after the rape incident, these 2 sepoys went away. I think these 2 were convicted later on, these 2 army personnel. When that picture, when the neighbor comes and then perhaps those journalists who went there, they have a video recording of her mouth frothing. She was shaken up in this frothing mouth and screaming, and that picture came up on my editing table. I was working on this film, Auditorium, is about how Manipur and, the tragedy of the armed conflict and how this violence and human rights abuses have happened. But I said, no. My team members said, I said, no, I can't make that. I can't make that woman's pain a spectacle in my film. If I saw this boys, what will be his implication? He's a dead boy. He's lying in silence and peace. Let him be. That's why UN protocol, Geneva Conventions, even legal parameters, human body is treated very sacredly. Habeas corpus in Article 32. If you look at the theory and political philosophy, you will know that the body is a very sacred object. In law, in war protocol, we have seen in this crisis abuse of those ethos. I have constantly reminded, we come from a community who had written a text called China Roll. There's an ethical war. We must protect our Ipunat. This is much before Geneva Convention. That same etiquettes respecting the dead bodies. Now they are saying that they get the permission from this one. It is in the public domain. I am asking, no, it's your ethical responsibility to think whether to publish or not publish. The fact that you have published that to 17 in number without any other picture. I said, thankfully you have excluded Meitei victims' picture. I thank you for this. Because you respect the departed soul from my community. But still, those people who died are part of my society. Even if they are not part of my society, these are human beings. That is the ethics. Now, if you have failed yourself by saying that I choose, because the permission mil gaya, this is in public domain, will you produce it? It is absolutely unethical one. And next time, then those Indian scholars and scholars from the south who have argued about how the dead bodies have been printed, they must condemn this aspect and this lame excuse. This is exactly the way I wrote in the letter also. The same thing New York Times reported, and how many of the scholars and journalists criticize these people. And they said, that's what I said, it looks like bullshitting. To kya kar loge? We have published it. What is your intention by publishing those things? Or those who want them to be published? Selling bodies, dead or alive, to serve a cause, to strengthen a particular narrative. Is that what you are trying? This is how we are victims. This is how we've been slaughtered. I can understand that motive if you are part of this crisis. But if you are a conscientious jurist, professors, I expect them to think thousands of times before printing those things for two reasons. For not only this ethical question, but also the fact that this will fuel emotion. We sustain those emotions. One of the things that I'm worried about our present conflict, unlike 1990s of the crisis in the hills, many of these brutal images are captured because of the smartphone. So the memory is not going to be here alone. It is going to be fossilized in these electronic gadgets. And when they popped up, there is a special challenge that we will be facing it. Memories is going to be reinvented again and again and again and again. That society has become different because of the invention of this internet and smartphone. We all know in social sciences, the society is not the only society. We don't live only in physical society, but we also exist in our virtual world, which influence our behavior and thinking. And one is thinking about how to deal with these images. You blatantly published it and you explain it away, the ethical implication as well as how it contributes to this conflict by saying that this is already in the public domain. What is this argument? An intimate moment shared between two lovers. Once they broke up, this particular man has uploaded that image and the girl commits suicide. Will you reproduce that video again saying that this is in the public domain? Will you? Even when the parents of that dead girl gives you this video, will you still publish it? That's the question. That is what I said, racist Orientalism. Not only that ethical question, it has a direct implication for the violence. You want people's emotion to run high. You want people to fight over your report. That's what this report is to me. There are a lot of factually incorrect ones in between as well. I have given you one example. In fact, two. There are others, but the greatest tragedy of report is the manner in which this information is framed and presented. And once I have shared with you this with you is because, unfortunately, how we respond to this. Then what I wanted to share with you is this. The thing that I started off, this is part of the information war that we have been facing, is part of the conflict. You have series of these information war, distorted, campaigning, making one community as victim and another as, all this word that used in this report, majoritarian and this government, that government. And one of the areas where they have failed, look at this. Government of India's response is called ineffective or ineffective response. If you have listened to me throughout this last 2 years, I said it's not ineffective response. I have said in two ways. Their inaction itself is an action that aggravates this. And I said they are complicit in this problem. But they have reduced the government of India's role as inadequate, ineffective response. Oh, they did respond. Government India is benevolent. They respond, but ineffective. I said their refusals to contain this violence for 2 years, despite having so many security forces. They are talking about accountability of security forces. They generously use Assam Rifles deposition. This is the last part which I have written to them. There is testimonies and deposition. How do you use them? And your choice of deposition is what creates a different reality. These depositions, or whether it is factually incorrect, it's not important. They will say that is what the Assam Rifle officers say. That is what the Meitei victims say. This is what the Kuki victims say. We have nothing to, we have just kept what their testimony says. They're trying to bluff themselves. So I will give two examples for them as well as for all of us. I'll give you one from the partition studies. The women committing suicide because they are afraid the other community will dishonor them and the community's honor will go. And some asking their father to cut off their head and so on. That narrative, well-known feminist Urvashi Vutalia once dealt with us. And she said, should I keep these testimonies independent of any intervention? Then she said, no, I can't do this. Because that will lead to a particular perspective. You position it, it will acquire a different meaning. So what they think that the patriarchal framework, you eulogize those women. You said, look at the courage to save our honor. And then these feminist scholars said, what makes you think that your community's honor is in my vagina? This is what the feminists started asking it. Why I should eulogize those little girl who says, Father, kill me before they rape me. This is a peculiar way of defining female sexuality under patriarchy. And I will be supporting that oppressive ideology if I eulogize these people committing suicide. That's a peculiar feminist take. So said, I will not leave these testimonies independent of my interpretation. I will say that this experience, I'll interpret it this way, under this frame of feminism. I'll be upfront about it. So you can't, when you're dealing with this kind of a crisis, by saying that we have given these testimonies. There is another issue. How many numbers of testimonies are used, in which sequence, and how you organize them is another matter. This takes me to the second aspect. Satyajit Ray, the well-known filmmaker, once he wrote a beautiful small piece called On the Question of Reality. He said, what is the relationship between feature fiction film and a documentary? He said, some people define documentary is based on reality. And he said, I don't like this distinction between fiction films and documentary on the basis of reality. Because he says, the reality of the drunken man or the wife beater that we saw in the feature films are also found in reality. So what do you mean by reality? And he says, the documentary filmmaker will be pick and choose this frame and then they will organize in a particular sequence. We know this act of organizing these different shots will create different meanings. It's something that we are familiar in cinema. So imagine a film, imagine a picture, a child playing on the grass, and there's the second shot is a snake on the grass. And third, there is a man with a terrifying looking man coming in, looking down like this with a knife. These are three different shots. You change the sequence, you create different meanings. Child was playing, the snake is shown, then this man comes with a knife. Then you think that this man is going to save this kid from the snake. Instead, if you saw the child, the man, and the snake will all likely become a symbolism of the man who's going to kill the child. So in the manner in which you organize your materials, create, this is also well known in historiography. The narrative truth. In history we said reality is when the historians link these events and put the perspective, then the very act of narrativizing itself produces that historical truth. This is well known, arguments by Head and White. So in that sense, saying that, we have testimonies and then deposition, the manner in which you are presented and freely used. The example is, this is my last comment in the chapter on media. Easy Eye, they generously quoted Easy Eye, which was already been contested, including in this book that we have done. Do they care to look at it? No. Kyo? At this, I'm coming to what the chair has said at the beginning. Before I wind it up, when they said, that they've just given the testimonies. These are real facts. But the manner in which we lined them up, the choice of those images. See, in documentary filmmaking, I'll give you another example, how the same reality that happened, if I choose a different picture, the meaning comes differently. Think about protesting students who are blocking the traffic. Police beating them up, and you said protesting students beaten up by the police. Now, in the same sequence, you see one ambulance got stuck there and one is struggling on life and death within that one. If you include that picture, then you will begin to sense an insensitivity at the problem of that protest. In that film, you don't incorporate every picture. Reality is captured through that frame. So which picture you decide to incorporate, which not, this report even includes people who have been part of this disinformation game, who have been spewing venoms against one community called Meiteis, who doesn't even live in India. What makes them to choose him and his testimony to be presented in the report? What is your motive? You talk that this hate speech has been going on social media. A man who has been doing this, who are not even part of this country, this state, who doesn't even stay in these countries, his testimony is incorporated. And as I told you, Easy Eye report, you quoted it extensively, and one line, you remember that what I said? Inverse pyramid. 1-2 sentences said, there is a furious response from Amju and editor Manipur groups. And then what did they do? They don't reproduce that text inside as a counter to what I have quoted from Easy Eye. Easy Eye, what they do, they push by saying that there was a furious response from the Amju and so forth, and they said the link is given below. It's in the footnote. When you already know that this report has been contested and there are problems which is any sensible person would have seen, you don't want to see that because you are determined to paint one community wrong. That's why they said even that in Assam Rifle officers telling Maitai media. If I started calling Indian Express and Times of India as Mayang media, will you accept it? Do they know that the Sangai Express and others were reporting with reports being filed by cookies and others, their correspondents from Kangpokpi and Churachandpur? The behavior of the local media changed, of course. They went against the ethical standard because they were sucking into the conflict later on. But the initial part, you look at the report, and many of these practitioners are not Maitais, but you dare to call it a Maitai, and you think it's an unproblematic expression, you use it. Whether they have Pangals as a staff member, correspondent, you don't care. So much so that's a factual incorrect because they wanted to develop the idea of majority versus minority. So they report the census report of 53% Maitais. What they don't realize is that this 53 includes Pangals. Maitai is less than 50%. That 53 is based on the mother tongue assessment. Don't you have this even basic? The literatures are already there. So 53 Maitai is majority because it fits the bill. They wanted to call it majority versus minority. Do the Pangals have problem in getting access to More and Churachandpur? Please tell me. Are they part of this conflict in that sense? They travel to these places. They are not part of the conflict. But that 53 includes them. This is a factual mistake. Terrible mistake. The moment you know that this 53 is not Maitai and Pangals are there as a part of that 53%, then you can't frame it as a majority minority. Because Pangals are not part of this conflict in that sense. They can get access to Churachandpur or in More. Do these professors and jury members know about this? Because you wanted to say majority, minority, Maitai 53%. It is this, I'm ending it, what the chair said is part of my assessment. That's what I said, Maitai Hindu, majority, Christian minority. That's the template, that's the frame where every time you wanted to say people don't want to listen. That's what the chair said. And there's a category, if any faculty member from philosophy is here. This is called testimonial injustice and hermeneutical injustice. What are these two? That's the problem we need to understand. That's a challenge. What is testimonial injustice? This is a concept given by a philosopher called Miranda Fricker. What he says is, what is testimonial? You are a Maitai, so I don't want to believe you. This is called testimonial injustice. It's a well-known work in philosophy. And what is hermeneutical injustice? It is like in the interpretive repertoire or scheme of things, there is a lack of concept to represent your experience. Aikoigi experience represent the way another concept yaudaba. Because of the larger structural system, say for example, hermeneutical injustice in the kainoda. Aikoigi marital rape. It's a difficult concept Because in a marital relationship, sexual relationship between the husband getting access to the sex of the woman and the woman getting access to the man's sex, is a contract, is part of it. So usme kahan se aage rape ka concept? That's the idea. So your experience of having forced to have sex by your husband, even though you don't want, you don't have that consent, that's the marital concept, marital rape. Because of the patriarchal notion of sexuality and the idea of marriage, we don't have a vocabulary to capture. So in psychotherapy, feminist psychotherapy, we often say we must provide a home to that experience by coining a home called marital rape. Hermeneutical justice is when your experience cannot be captured because there is no critical concept to capture it. Because of the structural meaning system. We suffer because they brand you as majority. Therefore, how can majority be victim, bhaiya, when you fight with minority? You understand this one? So you suffer from testimonial injustice because you don't believe, because you are because you are a majority. How can you be a victim? So this is the manner in which we suffer when you respond to this one is an entrenched idea. And in fact, these authors of this report could very well be a victim of this inability to free themselves. I'm giving this as a benefit of doubt. Many of the Manipuris started saying that they must have been financed by the cookies, by the narco-terrorists. They can be easily bought. I will not go that far. Because they fail themselves. As intellectuals, as people who have been for decades fighting for justice and human rights, because the ideological blind spots and then refusal to reflect on these works is what they are still trying to justify the report. And as I said, unfortunately, the end product is, this is end up painting one community, as I have already explained, example from the way they use the word, the way they choose their frame, the way they organize the interpretive repertoire for this work, the manner in which this text is organized, the primacy effect and the recency effect in between, how they present these testimonies. I have given from series of examples about feminist testimony, how they think about it in partition work and so on. These are the things that I've learned, and what disturbs me is whatever I'm speaking to you today, they are familiar with it. So the big question is, why they do this? That question is for us to investigate, and it is for them to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for the patient listening. I suppose some of our young minds, definitely we would be having some query or some questions, which I'm sure Professor Bimol would be happy to respond to. As I was keenly listening to him, I did receive a message from a very good friend of mine from Delhi. There was a committee which was constituted on June 4, 2013 by the Government of India. The Commission of Inquiry to look into the crisis that happened in Manipur, which I believe many of you are aware of. This is chaired by Justice Ajay Lamba, a former Chief Justice of Guwahati High Court, Himanshu Shekhar Das, a retired IAS, Aloka Prabhakar IPS retired. Subject to correction, the report was due to be submitted between, I think, 6 months. A committee was constituted. More than 26 months have elapsed. The question is whether we would be receiving or we would be having today the light of that report of this committee, which was constituted on June 4, 2013. This is a very relevant message that I received as I was listening to Professor Bimol. I would like to open the next part of the session to the House. I would request Professor Bimol to kindly collectively respond. Responding to one person or one query, I would suggest if any one of you would like to pose any query or certain clarification or certainly to highlight on particular issue, mic laibra akoigi babok the pina ba, is there a mic that can be passed down to the audience? Laibra. Ko volunteer am tapai biu aduga question si amamam gi mahutta mari manga pulap lauraga masigi honorable member of the parliament Professor Bimol would comprehensively respond to some of the queries that if you have. I would like a person to raise your hand so that our volunteer can approach you. In fact, the very deliberation that we have heard, everything was self-explanatory. Zabimol hai gibasing si yam na kupna pulap hai gibanina ayi wakandadi ay bhawakhara hangningam bani adubu. I think he did answer some of the queries that I had in my mind. Hangdragasu in a sumkhan badadi karigumba hangningba karigumba leragadi khut hangalaga amamam tang hangbiraga amma nidu pulap laujaraga. I would be happy if Professor Bimol would like to respond collectively. Amamam laubagi mahutta pulap aduga mingzu haibiu aduga kari department da laibano mahiroil oragasu college ki university ki mingzu haibiu koi record ta yaunaba kindly mention your name, the institution that you are with, or if you are working somewhere.
Hello. Good evening, sir. So my name is Manoranjan, sir. So the last part you have said, the most important thing is we have to investigate why they have done this. Keeping in mind that most likely they know exactly what they're doing. And despite that, we have to investigate why they're doing it. So now, sir, I'm concerned with what response we should give. Because I feel like there could be two outcomes. Like they have done it deliberately or there has been a genuine mistake. But which I think it's more deliberate. So in that case, what should be our response? Thank you, sir.
If there is also someone, kindly mention your name and...
Good evening, everyone. My name is Oinam Talaiwa. Right now, I have completed my master's from Manipuri department, and I am from Saiton.
Please keep the mic close to your mouth.
I am from Saiton Bilis, just near to Torbung. So I have my own experience of this conflict also. So I just want to ask a little bit clarification or a little doubt from this PUCL that there is some, I also gone through the report, and they have a few lines of that poppy cultivation, and they mentioned that they plant or cultivate poppy because of poverty and because there is no alternativeness of their livelihood. I think that is, I just want a little clarification from from our respected sir. And apart from this PUCL report, I just want one more doubt that after this post-conflict, I think our youth's mindset have been, have been brainwashed in a different way, or what are the samna haibada ai dum kanoda hajarage ai khitang nervous chatpa
Please feel free in any language you wish to.
irang thok tringai mamang da leiramba khoi youth singi mindset siga irang thoklaba matungda khoi gi leiriba youth sing sigi mindset si khitang brainwash tawkiba haigadra aduduga chatkadaba narrative amada chattabida atopa narrative amada chatkibagi mindset sigi matang da su khitang clarification khara haidi dum khara pibinawa khoi resource person dagi haijare haidi ai isamaksu red zone area de lakpanina ai tasena ai master like makhatam thani haibagi asase sunglei leigide maramdi akhoina hojik leiribado yamna na kay haini yamna awaba phibam da leirawa mafamda dohagi aina ai isagi oina personally ai isana like tamjage khallaga masa thokcharakibani tawtabu ai laiminaramba singdi adumak lehauri haiba tare aina puthorakpasu yadaba adugumba situation every northern corner of Manipur gi conflict area da su leiramgane na ai khanje youth sing da tongana akhoi gi future se pura maige yama da chakhiba dumaina adui matang da su kitang thambina ni.
Thank you. Let us take a couple of more. Yes, there is a hand here.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. Oza, my query on today's deliberation is on an alternative perspective. Let us say persons like Rami Desai, who is held as a pro-Meitei and Karan Thapar as pro-Kuki. Now, as you said, it is agenda and narrative-driven propaganda and particularly information warfare. Rami Desai is stated to be a right-winger and Karan Thapar as left-centered propagandists. In that context, sir, what if Indian National Congress is in Manipur's helm of affairs during the crisis, particularly, and not BJP? Will there be any chance of alternative narrative being framed if that is the case, sir?
If there is none, then I would request Professor Bimol to respond. As a person who was listening very keenly as I was chairing, I was caught in a dilemma whether we should, or somebody should, give the perspective of what we have seen, not to negate or not to counter. Akoisi huzik PUCL na thore iba mayam sida nungnangba nungaitaba phawgu sida team amana natraga independent body amana Makhoina hairishi lali haiba natabida proper perspective ta keeping in view of all the humanitarian perspectives of what Oza Bimol has said. Madugumba amma tangai padabra haibagi ay wakanda lae ibi matungda hangadaba yauragati dum khut hangar pirau ko ay uzu udabagi ne I little I think Oza hojiki ahum duna adum respond to biraga yarani ko.
Thank you for the question. I think the first one is, Manoranjan. Manoranjan question is that is it deliberately they have done it or they are not aware of it? The notion of deliberate is I will take a slightly nuanced way. When you are ideologically so committed, you can have blind spots. That is exactly the reason why we said in research, when you do a reflexive orientation, knowledge has an ideological dimension. And one should be aware of that. What are most likely tendency? So the moment you're used to framing things as minority, majority, Hindu majority and Christian minority, tribal and non-tribal, this is the trap. I think they suffer from that. So in that sense, ideologically driven, so it's deliberate, driven by ideology. That's my suspicion. I say this, for example, let's look at the concept of tribe. Very respected sociologist, Professor Virginia Kaka is part of this team. He's a renowned sociologist who is an expert on tribals and so on. We know the problematics of this concept of tribe. Okay? So they have this understanding that, Meiteis are non-tribal and the other is tribe. You know, it's a very, what should I say? If you're already aware of this problematics of this concept, how it applies on the ground, whether in reality on the ground, does it fit this anthropological category of a tribe? And what is the distinction between tribal and scheduled tribe? If you're already aware of this, I want to reflect off some of the issues which for the rest of us in Manipur as well. You know, tribe versus caste, this is another dimension. No? So for us, probably because we come under what is called civilizational category of Hindus and Muslims. That's historically speaking, those people who comes under that things were dealt separately. If you're outside of these parameters, tribe is a very convenient category that people often use. But the moment you turn it into scheduled tribe, it becomes far more complicated. These dimensions will change. Even for listing oneself as a scheduled tribe, I think it's 2015, it's instituted by Modi and there's a commission. Terms like primitive trade, they're trying to change. I think recommendation is already there to define somebody to include them themselves as a part of the scheduled tribe list. This criteria given, some of them will change because the committee has suggested this smacks of an old colonial framework and so on. So the primitive tribe. So idea of scheduled tribe is again slightly different. But if you look at some of the features, say tribe, if you are a tribe होगे तो जंगल से relationship होगा, ये आदिवासी वाला जो notion है, then it's related to the forest, and forest is their land, and why should they be alienated from them? What people don't realize is that if you look some of the reports, DC Kate report is one classic one in the 1930s. The Darbar requested British forest officers to do a study on forests. And it reports, it's interesting commentaries on Kuki as a community and their relationship with forests. It's not very nice. In fact, if I quote it, they said, the cookies are the greatest enemy of forests. That's what D.C. Kate said in that text. And he was comparing those earlier people, probably without mentioning it, but we know these are what is today called Rongmais. How these new settlers have pushed them upwards, and the forest scenario changes in these areas. The southern part of the state, including southwest and southeast. This is in D.C. Kate's report on Indian forests. So he classified 4 groups of forests in Manipur. So one of the forests is those lower ranges and adjoining the valley areas. There are forests. And it's interesting they said Meiteis depend on these forests for building houses, for building boats, and for firewoods. So Meitei community is a forest-dependent community. Chingda kadu na sing chanba, pata kumdana long khonba. It's basic biological need to survive. So he's saying going up to get the firewoods, going down to catch the fish. This is a survival mechanism. We're in between. That's topographical ecological factors. So Meitei's relationship with forest. This is not an ancient one. I have seen this. Gas LPG is a new entry. I think most of all we grew up seeing firewoods. And if you remember, even the Hautak incident in Kumbi, remember those 3 people who were killed? Where did they go to that forest? To get firewoods. During this conflict. So Meitei depends on forest. Another character that we are related to forest in a much more deeper cultural thing than any other group in this state is that Meiteis are the only community who actually have a lived tradition worshipping forest deity, Umang Lai. We are the only community in this state. People have abandoned their traditional religious belief and practices as pagan religions and so on. Meiteis still practice Umang Lai worship. We call it Lai Arauba. And many of the Meiteis still depend on firewoods. This is simply because you are not defined as scheduled tribe, and assumption is that you are not a scheduled tribe, hence you are not a tribe. The other way around also it works. The logic is, despite knowing that there is a distinction. So if somebody has been defined as a scheduled tribe, then you said inherent they are forest mayor, they have a right over the forest Adivasi. That is the mainstream framing from the mainstream India. They try to impose this on us, these categories, these accessionist categories. And think that Meiteis have nothing to do with forests. You understand this one? And since you are not a tribal, you have nothing to do with that. These are what the category produces, these assumptions and interpretation. You understand what I'm saying? So if you don't critically evaluate your categories, how this is producing a different kind of a reality, you will end up making mistakes. You are driven by a particular ideology. So I think my take on your notion of deliberate, my largest suspicion is because they have refused or not able to do a proper investigation. That's what I'm saying, the choice of the word. All the theories and methods that I have discussed is all from social sciences and history. Is known. Media study, social science analysis and historical methods. Many of these members of the juries are far more superior scholars than I do. The kind of knowledge I have, if I compare with them, they would be far more ahead of me. But despite that, how come they make this mistake? That's the question I was posing at the end. The other question is from these Torbung areas. This is where all this violence. This report did have some of the deposition, from that area. Adu dasu yamna violence, where it started. You can have that Punkaya, the deposition given, the testimony given by the Meiteis clearly tells you, and the deposition given by the Kuki community in this report tells you that the experience of violence is different. That is why I'm saying that you are showing these pictures of a beheaded man twice in the report. And without even organizing what was the nature of that violence, that day's incident, what had happened. Out of context, you put it, and that gruesome image, and you think you are doing justice, and you think it will not arouse feelings and emotions, and that will bring peace. And these are some of the things I've already shared with you. So in the Torbung areas, these experiences, the youth's mindset have changed. Some change for the good thing, for better. We have your fighting spirit, your survival instinct has kicked in. But there are other unwanted developments among the youth as well in our society. That is also going to happen. And this report is also a warning to those undesirable things which had happened. So I understand that this experience actually gave you Hon'ble wakanse. Inti India feeling like I've reminded on the floor of the house. The manner in which people look at India is also changing because of this experience. That's something that we understand. The last question this gentleman asked me is, it's slightly political, if Congress were in the party, but it is also very important for us to know. Just as the mainstream tribal, non-tribal, whether it fits in historically without then, the British have made the mistakes of classifying differently. The post-colonial scholars is supposed to decolonize some of these categories and look afresh. And what happens in mainstream mainland India cannot be here. That's precisely the reason there is Schedule 5 and Schedule 6 differently. And Schedule 6, what is the difference between Assam as a template and Nagaland, Manipur? Can we apply what is being applied in Assam, in Manipur? They think some of these British officers thought that it is. Some people say it's not. So there is a complicated issues. Until and unless you unpack them, we end up tribal, non-tribal, the same old categories. So in part of that idea is right wing, left wing, right wing, left wing. I said our relationship is horizontal. We are not vertical. Our relationship is more like a vertical, not a horizontal, left, right. But now they are doing it. This is a very interesting insight that I have also got it during this crisis. Within quote, these left liberals, they will be hounding Meiteis. And I've seen, I'll not name one of the portal I used to read really regularly. And I use a word called spark in my article in the Hindu when this violence describing. I use the word, the spark. And some PhD scholar, that portal invited to do an analysis. The spark mean that he's already ready to kill us, blah, blah, blah. He write, and this journalist is allowing that to publish. I said, what's going on? And they don't realize that spark is also used by Professor Swan in his article in Indian Express before me. Nobody tried to decipher spark means this, that. So what they are doing is that if you are a Meitei, that's what I said, testimonial injustice and hermeneutical injustice. ये Meitei है, इसने spark किया तो कुछ negative डालना है उसका रखना है. And then respected journalists and news portals started publishing that kind of an article, incoherent article. But the same spark is used. That spark comes in Professor Swan's work. So I have been watching this, if you're a Meitei, then, you must be bombarded with this. So, but the other one is, interestingly, you mentioned them, some of the right-wing scholars and in the intellectual class, they tend to defend Meiteis. And also trying to strike a balance with the cookies. This is where the Meitei feels abandoned and feel that something wrong has been done. This feeling is yet to be registered in the rest of the country. And that is why this report is. The resistance to change, even when you point out the mistake, there will be resistance. So we have to do what we need to call out is that engage in this. That one of the purpose for me addressing here is to share what is this report means for us. What should we do? How should we go about it? And where the mistakes have been made, that's what I have tried to point out here. So the trap is minority, majority, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, tribal, non-tribal, right-wing, left-wing. So the implicit assumption is this Meitei is a majority. There is support, use the word primarily Hindu. You understand? So primarily Hindus, and obviously the underlying assumption is, majority hai, Hindu hai, BJP ka government hai, right hai, CM is a Meitei, that falls in place. And the sorry part is, I have reminded you in my talk, when we strongly feel that government of India is deliberately playing this divide and rule policy because they want to destroy Manipur. That's what majority of the Meitei will feel. My observation, my assessment is that. They are angry with the Union Armed Forces, particularly Assam Rifles. Not without reasons. Confrontation between the army and the Assam Rifles. But as whole unit, I said there are certain units involved. So we have to be very cool. But that is called a measured way of analysis. But without, you said, police are with the Meiteis. No, the report, even this report will tell you that police in Churachandpur take sides. When the incident happened in Torbung areas, those police coming from Churachandpur did not stop. Remember? They were leading. So police got divided. So as an institution, nothing to be happy about. Because this is the first line. Responded to law and order situation. If you do not revive your local police, you cannot have law and order in the state, because law and order is a state subject. And the first line institution that deals with law and order is the state police. You can't expect the paramilitary or the armed forces, army to deal with law and order. So you should be feeling sorry that this police has been sort of corrupted and communally divided. Some people seem to be celebrating it by branding it Meitei as a police society. It's not Meitei. There are issues. Why is that the first few incidences, the last part of the April, May, what did police do? The violence happened. One MLA comes and release them. This report didn't even mention that. They only say some people burn, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't go into that. They were arrested. Some politician comes and released them. You know, that burning of gym, vandalization, and so on. That emboldened. And they said they were pumped in with Manipur police, tribal, to force them. You know, the way you present the narrative, you don't want Manipur police to be there. If you send them, you say, oh, Meiteis are sending police. You will see in this report this kind of insinuation. So I think, a systematic way of doing things, and I've just shared with you the framework and examples to go about it, and I've just tried to remind you, this is a larger part of the conflict, the narrative control war that we have. And constantly, this report, I was expecting, given the composition, that they would be introducing something where both these communities can come and share and talk. Instead, the division is all the more sharpened. Now all the more, because you are given a fresh element to divide, to see the division again. And that's the tragedy with this report. As I said it, we must engage with it, but remember that this is only a part of a larger engagement. You will be mistaken if you say facts kya hai, and then it is only a separate report, only this report. No, I think our chair has also reminded Ajay Lamba committee report, the judgment on the tape in the Supreme Court. These are going to produce a series of narratives. This is going to come. And I'm hoping that Ajay Lamba committee will be far more objectively dealing with these issues and fixing accountability. The basic question is, how did a state like India allow a civil war-like situation in a part of its territory like this? That's the fundamental question. This report has simply said, oh, ineffective response of the Amit Shah and all. I think the fundamental problem is the federal relationship. What is the relationship with the state government and the union government throughout this crisis? They don't bother because they want to blame one community fitting with the government. That's why you're happy. If you're aware, then you will know, had the gut to go confront, ask question. You have AFSPA, you have so many troops under CRPC 131. You're supposed to deal with this. How did it happen? The thousands of troops have been pumped in from the 4th of May. How is that India can have this kind of a crisis? You don't quite go on the line. When you say state complicity, it's the state government. Complicity of the security forces, this is the police. Throughout the experience, what has been people saying about Assam Rifles? Look at that Assam Rifles testimony is incorporated. It says it started in Imphal. And they produce it as a testimony. You understand? So I think that is where this report is creating and renewing this anger. And then for them, this is the vindication of the victimhood. I think that is where the report has failed itself. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'll give to the chair again.
Before the organizers of this very enlightening session, the Manipur University Students Union, the Research Club, Manipur University, kindly allow me to share my sincere gratitude to the entire patient audience. I also appreciate Professor Bimol coming all the way to share his concerns about the report that we have seen from the PUCL. As a journalist from the media, let me share this concern with you. When we started our career as a writer, the first lesson that we learn is do not name a community in the event of a conflict. Do not write the name of a child in your own newspaper or in any media. That is the responsibility of the media. What has happened in Manipur and how the national media has in fact changed the entire norm of reporting, whether it is a reporting or an editorial comment. They would blanketly say a community, a Kuki, a Meitei. It is against the very ethos of a person who is giving a report. If you look back in Manipur, when the problem started, the Manipur media was more responsible than the national media. There were least mention of a community. However, when you start reading newspapers, you start listening to the media from the mainland, they started particularly mentioning the community. I was invited to share my concerns with the institutes of journalism in many parts of the country. I was asked by the students of what is happening in Manipur. There were many debates, there were many discussions. When the problem started in Manipur, there were many journalists who were interviewing people from different communities. Their popularity, the number of hits, the number of viewers might have increased 1,000 times. And if you re-look at those videos or interviews of people, it added more fuel to the problem, making the conflicting parties hate each other more and more. That was something which I suppose, as a media person and a citizen of this country, should be objecting. As Professor Bimol has very correctly said, I wouldn't say that those members who were a part of this very committee from the PUCL, intellectually depraved, emotionally depraved, or spiritually depraved. There was something wrong in that very team. This is something that we can conclude, we can infer. What is way ahead? What is the future of our children? There is a responsibility of any committee. There is a responsibility in reporting a fact. There is a responsibility of every single person who is communicating to a community or to the nation. I think this is something that the country, the nation has witnessed. As far as my own experience, we all know that Manipur is a very small place. It is about 23,000 square kilometers, a little more. We have had the privilege of looking at military strategies throughout the world. We also happen to report from the conflict area. Young students, you'll be very surprised to know that Manipur has 2 divisions. I will just add one line to what Professor has said. There are 2 divisions in Manipur, in the form of a 57 Mountain Division and in the form of the South, IGR South, that is Inspector General of Disarmed Rifles South, which is 2 divisions. You can Google and see what actually a division is, from World War II to I to the present deployment of what division actually means. As a journalist, I know that every division has minimum 3 sectors. A division is headed by a major general. A corps is headed by a lieutenant general. Now, when you have a division, you have minimum 3 to 4 sectors, which is commanded by a brigadier. A sector has 3 to 4 battalions. In such a small place, which is about 23,000 square kilometers, you have that 3 divisions. Notwithstanding the presence of the IRB, the CRPF, the BSF, the people to armed personnel ratio, and things happen of that great magnitude that the government, the first duty of the government is to protect the life and property of every single citizen, irrespective of what community you belong to. The first question is, did the government of India ensure the safety and security of every single citizen by those administrative system, both by the uniformed personnel? That is one thing that we have to look at it. Protecting life and property of every single citizen is the first duty of a government. And notwithstanding the presence of that huge number of large number of armed security personnel to protect us, what they were doing, and those days, you could hear the endless number of flights landing at Imphal airport. Thousands, hundreds were brought into Manipur, at least to check, at least to control. Could they perform their duty? There lies the implication of what Professor was saying, that the very committee constituted, we would like to see that report too. PUCL has presented its report, which I suppose I am compelled to say that they were, or rather, intellectually depraved individuals giving a slanted view. They will defend themselves as a team. This discourse should continue among young minds today. And my concluding remark is to congratulate all of you. And I thank Professor Bimol as an academic, as a researcher, and a prolific speaker. We need to listen to people at least who can convince us, convince the people, and convince those who were involved or they were part that we are doubting their credibility. Once again, I shouldn't be thanking you all because there is a person to propose a vote of thanks. Personally, I thank each and every one of you and personally Professor Bimol for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our Chairperson and Honorable MP, for your valuable observation and encouragement. Ladies and gentlemen, please once again give a big round of applause for esteemed dignitaries. The Manipur University is truly honored and blessed to have our esteemed dignitaries' guidance today. As we conclude our session, I would like to call upon our General Secretary outgoing, Saikom Sanju Maite, to give a vote of thanks.
Ngasi Manipur University Student Union amadi Research Club Manipur University na sinjalang jaduna pangthok chariba a talk on PUCL's Tribunal report on the Manipur crisis hariba ngasi talk asida saruk yaba lakpikhiba ikai khongnabada matik charaba ngasi speaker obikhiba mingoina hangat charbada ja Bimol Honorable MP jabu ngasi Yamna ngasigi leriba current situation siga yamna marik chumba wafam kya thambiram bagi damaktasu musuki maikai dagi amadi Manipur University gi mairo singi mahut singjaraga amuka na thangat phongdokchari loina na ngasigi chairman oibikhiba oja mingoina hangatchar bada Ningthoukhongam Ibungochoubi ojabusu ikai khumna uchabu loina na thagat phongdokchari loina na ngasigi thauramasibu hawbadagi loiba phawba Mapung fan binabgi damakta lengbirak tuna saruk yabi khiba khudingma puju thagat phongdokchari